What is different about chronic childhood illness today versus 40 years ago? I made up 40 years. You can pick any time frame, 30, 40, 50. What is different about chronic childhood illness today versus 30, 40, 50 years ago?
I'll take that one. So if you look back into early 1960s, you had a rate of chronic illness in children of less than 10%. So you're looking at maybe you had some asthma. I'm sure you all, growing up maybe knew a child who had asthma or environmental allergies or maybe a type 1 diabetes. Those are the kinds of chronic illnesses that you saw. Fast forward to today, you have 54% of American children with at least one chronic illness. Now that is a diagnosed chronic condition. That's not even tracking the kids who have, chronic constipation, chronic sinus infections, chronic diarrhea, who have behavioral problems that are really have an origin in a body out of balance, but nobody's diagnosing it as such. The kids are just so much sicker today than they ever have been before. We've never seen chronic illnesses in children like this. Chronic illness is something that's supposed to impact older people who've led a life full of various things that might have contributed to that chronic illness. But our children are coming out of the womb sick. They're coming out immunocompromised, essentially. And this is setting them up for, any number of different diagnoses. You're looking at rates, these discrete epidemics everybody thinks is happening. Everybody thinks there's an obesity epidemic in children because we have 1 in 3 children in America either obese or overweight. Or people think there's an asthma epidemic because you have 1 in 8 kids with asthma. Or an ADHD epidemic because you have 1 in 9 kids with ADHD. And then there's the autism epidemic, which is, when I started looking into this about a decade ago, it was 1 in 150 children diagnosed with autism. Today, the most recent numbers, looking at numbers that came out in 2014 through 2016, put it at 1 in 40. 1 in 40 children diagnosed with an autism spectrum disorder. And the thing that's a little bit tricky about all these epidemics rising concurrently is people only pay attention to the one that impacts them or the one that they're most concerned about, and they're not seeing the forest through the trees here. They're not seeing the big picture, that all of the kids are impacted by something. It just manifests in different symptoms in different kids depending on what their total load is and what their various environmental factors have been that have precipitated that condition in them. The bottom line is, we've never seen anything like this. The future is bleak for this generation of children if we don't intervene. The good news is that the paradigm is shifting because people used to think that chronic diseases were a function of your genes. So if you developed heart disease or cancer or whatever it was that you developed later in life, people assumed it was in your genes. That you have the BRCA1, so therefore you have breast cancer, or you have various propensity to develop chronic illness. Because we're seeing in the kids this early, at startling rates, we know it's something about the way we're living that's making them sick. So that's not the genes. So that's actually great news, right? If we can break out of that genetic determinism that makes us think that if you're sick, you'll always be sick, and start thinking about the possibility that you can get well again, that's enormously powerful and enormously empowering for parents. But parents don't know it yet, because when they go to see their pediatrician, the pediatrician will say, we don't know why they have this, they'll probably always have it, I have a couple medications for you, and that's all I got. So what we need to do is start changing the conversation and start talking about recovery and healing and getting rid of EMFs and the toxins and eating nutrient-dense food and all the things that need to happen to allow a body to heal or to prevent it from getting sick in the first place.
I wanted to add to what Beth just said, that the Environmental Working Group did a study and they discovered that children are born with over 297 chemicals in the cord blood. 297 chemicals. These are chemicals that we're exposed to on a daily basis, that the pregnant moms are exposed to. The air that they're breathing, the food, the pesticides, the plastics, all that. So that's having a huge effect. And so, I always tell moms, if you're thinking about getting pregnant, start cleaning up your diet and your environment early on when you're just thinking about getting pregnant. And one of the 40% of children have food allergies. Right? I mean, that's just shocking. And I know that Jeffrey Smith was here talking about genetically modified food. And when the pediatricians that I work with, when they get the kids off GM foods, their food allergies disappear. So it's just something to consider.
Beth, I was going to ask you, what's your most dramatic example of an intervention that made a change in a child's life? Each of you may have one, and I think people understand it better when they hear. I know your own story with your child yourself, but I'm thinking about others whom you've helped. It helps to sort of bring it all home. Right.
Well, thanks. A great question. One of my favorite was, and it's just such a simple thing. So a mom had called me, and her child wasn't sleeping, and the crib was up against a wall, and I measured the fields because not only did the child have, there was a baby monitor, which is a problem. Deborah can talk about that. But there was a huge field coming from the wall up against where the crib was. So I said, what's on the other side of this wall? Well, there was a refrigerator on the wall. So simple solution, we moved the crib to the other side of the room, and guess what? The baby slept really well after that. So, I tell everybody to sort of pay attention to where you're sleeping and what's on the other side of your wall, because if there's a big machine operating, it's not good for your nervous system, and you will not relax or heal.
Yeah, so I'm not sure if this is working or not. I've been documenting recovery stories for almost a decade, and part of the reason for doing that is like following the breadcrumb trail, right? If this is possible for a child with autism or for a child with an autoimmune disease, this is possible for any of us, and we should be learning and studying these anecdotes. So I've got dozens of them. One of my favorite was a woman who called me because I run a nonprofit organization where we try and give parents healing tools, one of which is integrative practitioners that, like you were talking about, that can actually help holistic types of doctors, et cetera, that can help this this kind of situation. And she said that she was being pressured by a rheumatologist at the hospital she was treating her child at for rheumatoid arthritis to put her 18-month-old baby on methotrexate because her baby had been diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, couldn't walk, was in severe pain, and the doctor said, I will call Child Protective Services on you if you do not treat, because methotrexate is the standard of care. So, methotrexate is a chemotherapeutic agent. It's a cancer treatment, but it's highly toxic to the body.
And it can cause cancer.
Correct.
As well as treat it.
So this mother stuck to her guns and said, I'm not putting my baby on that kind of chemotherapeutic agent. What else have you got? Doctor had nothing else. Mother went to go see a naturopath, a naturopathic clinic that actually specialized in autoimmune diseases, which is what rheumatoid arthritis was. They did a food sensitivity test, which is kind of what you were talking about. Very, very common in children to have undiagnosed food sensitivities, which are not food allergies, but sensitivities which there's no gold standard test for, so most doctors don't even look for them. And this baby, 18-month-old, had sensitivities to nightshades, wheat, dairy, took these things out of this child's diet, and this child's symptoms disappeared. Disappeared. These foods, it's more complex than just the foods causing it. It had to do with sort of some things that were going on in her digestion and things like that. But the point is that that child did not have rheumatoid arthritis anymore because the mother changed the child's diet. That it's not always as simple as that. If you go to the website documentinghope.com, there is a tab that says the children, and there are stories that we've documented of kids who've reversed rheumatoid arthritis, just like that one, autism, ADHD, asthma, depression, MS. We have a child who's 16 years old and almost completely eliminated her MS, chronic Lyme, chronic pain, those kinds of things. You can read those stories there. And I will also give you a book recommendation. One of my favorite books is written by a New York Times journalist. Her name is Susanna Meadows. And she wrote a book just recently called The Other Side of Impossible. She is also another story of a parent who stuck to her guns when her child was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. And she found alternative healing solutions, including modifying the diet, getting rid of EMFs, addressing hidden food sensitivities, things like this, detoxifying the home environment. Her child lost his rheumatoid arthritis diagnosis as well. So she wrote a book cataloging all kinds of people who have reversed their chronic conditions by making lifestyle changes. She talks about Terry Walls, who reversed her MS, and a whole bunch of other people. So I highly encourage you to check out that book. It's called The Other Side of Impossible. documentinghope.com, and actually tomorrow I'm doing a talk where I will tell you plenty about, it's a project, it's a prospective research study where we're actually trying to simulate a recovery story in children, or trying to actually do a controlled recovery in a somewhat clinical setting.